Imagine for a moment, you are standing before the monumental gates of Karnak. The columns rise like stone giants, and on every surface, carved into eternity, in language that transcends words, symbols. Not simple drawings, but cosmic keys, codes that open the doors between worlds. Welcome to the deepest journey you will ever take through Kemet. The Black Land, the African civilization that mastered not only the Nile, but the very secrets of existence. Today, we will decipher together the sacred alphabet of Kemet, from A to Z. Each symbol you will see is not just art. It is condensed theology. It is carved philosophy. It is power manifested in form. Think about it. When a Kemetic priest drew the Ankh on a temple wall, he was not simply decorating. He was literally inscribing eternal life into that space. When a queen wore the uraeus on her crown, she was not simply following royal fashion. She was channeling the power of the fire serpent that protected pharaohs since the beginning. And when a scribe carved a cartouche with the king's name, he was ensuring that name, that essence, would cross millennia, and it did. We, here, in the 21st century, still speak these names: Ramses, Tutankhamun, Hatshepsut, names that were protected by symbols, and that became themselves eternal. This is not an ordinary history lesson. This is an initiation, because the symbols of Kemet were exactly that. Tools of initiation. Each temple was a mystery school. Each tomb was a navigation manual for the soul. And each amulet, each talisman, each inscription, who carried the weight of thousands of years of accumulated spiritual knowledge, African knowledge. Because yes, we need to make this very clear from the beginning. Kemet was an African civilization, born in the heart of Africa, nourished by the waters of the Nile that came from the depths of the continent, and its spirituality, its worldview, its philosophy. All of this is African heritage, a heritage that the entire world studied, copied, admired, but did not always adequately acknowledge. Today, we acknowledge. And more than that, we dive deep, because organizing these symbols from A to Z is not just a didactic exercise. It's a way to show the vastness, the complexity, the absolute depth of Kemetic thought. How many civilizations do you know that developed symbols so powerful that still today, 5,000 years later, people tattoo them on their bodies? That still today, jewelers reproduce them in necklaces and rings? That still today, designers use them in logos and brands? The Ankh is everywhere. The Eye of Heru has been adopted by cultures worldwide. The Keper scarab inspired complete artistic movements. This is not coincidence. This is power. Symbolic power that crosses time, and today you will understand where this power comes from. We will begin our journey with the letter A and end with Z, but know that this is not an end. It is a cycle, because in Kemet, everything is cyclical. Life, death, rebirth. The sun that rises dies and is reborn. The seasons that turn eternally, and the symbols that continue alive. Generation after generation, prepare yourself, because you are about to learn the language the Netjeru spoke, the language the pharaohs governed with, the language that souls used to navigate the Duat, the world of the dead. This is the sacred language of Kemet, the alphabet of eternity, and it begins now. Let us begin with the most iconic symbol, the most recognizable, the one that summarizes, in a single form, the entire life philosophy of Kemet, the Ankh, the key of life. Look at it, a crux ansata with a circular loop at the top. Simple at first glance, but loaded with meanings that would make entire theological treatises. The Ankh represents eternal life, but not just biological life, the life you live now. The Kemetians understood that there were multiple forms of life. Earthly life, yes, but also spiritual life. Life in the Duat, life that continues when the heart stops beating, and the Ankh was the key, literally, that opened the doors between these dimensions. Observe the form. The circle at the top represents the womb, the feminine, The eternal return. The vertical shaft represents the phallus, the masculine. The generative force. The horizontal bar, the open arms, balance, unified duality in a single form. Kemet condensed the mystery of creation, masculine and feminine. Heaven and earth, spirit and matter, all united, all in balance. You will see the Ankh in the hands of all the Necheru. Ra holds the Ankh, Aset holds the Ankh, Anpu holds the Ankh. Why? Because they are the givers of life, the guardians of existence. And when a pharaoh received the Ankh from a Necher in a ceremony, it was not symbolic, it was literal. He was receiving divine authorization to continue living, to continue reigning, to be himself a giver of life to his people. Common Egyptians carried small ankhs as amulets, hung around the neck, hidden in clothes, buried with them, because they believed, and rightly so within their worldview, that this symbol kept them connected to the vital force of the universe, to the Ka, the spiritual energy that animates all things. But let us move forward. For the letter A, we also have Amenta, a less known symbol, but equally profound. Amenta represents the western horizon, the place where the sun sets, and in Kemetic cosmology, the west was the direction of death, because just as the sun dies in the west, the human soul also went west after physical death. Amenta was, literally, the underworld, but not a Christian underworld, not a hell of eternal punishment. Amenta was the Duat, the realm of Vaisya, the place where souls underwent transformations, judgments, purifications to then be reborn, like the sun that dies in the west, but is reborn in the east. The symbol of Amenta usually shows stylized mountains with the sun between them, or the marked horizon, indicating this passage, this border between worlds. And it was painted on the walls of burial chambers, on sarcophagi, on papyri of the books of the dead, so that the soul would know. This is the way, this is the horizon you must cross. Do not fear, because on the other side there is renewal. And now we arrive at the Cartouche in Kemetic, Shenu, which literally means that which encircles, one of the most interesting symbols of Kemet, because it shows something fundamental in the mentality of that people, the supreme importance of the name. The cartouche is that elongated oval you see surrounding hieroglyphs, especially royal names. But why an elongated circle? Why this specific form? Because the circle represents eternity, infinity, the endless, and the cartouche is a circle that has been stretched, expanded, to fit the pharaoh's complete name inside, but maintaining its magical property, eternal protection. In Kemet, the name was not just an identification, it was a part of the soul. You had the physical body, Kat. You had the vital force, Ka. You had the immortal soul, Ba. And you had the name, Ren. If your name were forgotten, if no one pronounced it anymore, you would cease to exist in the afterlife. That is why erasing someone's name from monuments was the greatest possible curse. It was literally killing the person a second time, killing their eternity. It happened to Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh. His successors tried to erase his name from history, tried to destroy his immortality, but the cartouche protected against this. When a name was inside a cartouche, it was under magical protection. It was encapsulated in eternity. Ramses II, the Great, put his cartouche in every temple he built, and there were many. Why? Because he understood perfectly. The more times his name was written, the more times it was read, pronounced, the stronger his existence in the afterlife would become, the more eternal he would become, and it worked. We are here, more than 3,000 years later, and we still say, Ramses. His strategy worked. The cartouche was not used only for kings. Important queens also had this right. Nefertiti, Hatshepsut, Cleopatra, all had their names protected by the Shenu, and to this day, When archaeologists find a cartouche, it is cause for celebration. Because there, inside that sacred circle, is a name, an identity, a person who lived millennia ago and who still exists because we, now, are reading their name, pronouncing it, giving them life again. These three symbols, Ankh, Amenta, Cartouche, already show us the depth of Kemetic philosophy, eternal life, passage to the beyond, and protection of the name, of identity, of essence. But this is just the beginning, because the journey is just starting. And the sacred alphabet of Kemet has much more to reveal, many more mysteries to unveil. Prepare yourself, because now we enter the letters that reveal the very pillars of the cosmos. There is a symbol in Kemet that represents, more than any other, the idea of stability, of firmness, of something that cannot be knocked down, no matter how much force is applied. This symbol is the Djed, and its story is intertwined with one of the most powerful myths of all Kemetic mythology, the story of Wzir, Osiris. Look at the Djed. It looks like a column, a pillar with 4 horizontal platforms at the top, 4 levels, 4 planes of existence. But what does it really represent? There are several interpretations. The most accepted is that the Djed is the spine of Wzir, Osiris, the god who was betrayed, murdered, dismembered, and then resurrected. Wzir, Osiris, was the original king of Kemet, the god who taught agriculture, laws, civilization. But his brother, Seth, consumed by envy, killed him. Not just killed, cut his body into 14 pieces, and scattered these pieces throughout Kemet. Aset, Isis, his sister wife, the great magician, spent years searching for each piece, found 13, only one was not recovered, the phallus, devoured by a fish. Aset, Isis, with her supreme magic, recomposed Osiris's body and resurrected him long enough to conceive a child, Heru, Horus, the Avenger. But Sir Osiris could no longer reign over the living. He became the Lord of the Duat, the King of the Dead, the Judge of Souls, and the Djed. His spine became the symbol of his resurrection, of the stability that comes after chaos, of order that emerges from destruction. That is why the Djed was raised in special ceremonies, the raising of the Djed. A ritual where literally an enormous Djed pillar was raised vertically, symbolizing the resurrection of Wzir, Osiris, and, by extension, the renewal of the entire land, the guarantee that the Nile would flood, that harvests would come, that cosmic order, Ma'at, would remain intact. The pharaoh personally participated in this ritual because he was the living incarnation of Heru, Horus, the son of Wzir, Osiris, and raising the Djed was to affirm, I am stable, my kingdom is stable, the cosmos is stable, nothing can knock us down. Kemetians used Djed amulets, especially men, for protection of the spine, literally, but also for spiritual protection, to ensure that, in death, they too would have their resurrection, as Wzir, Osiris, had. Now, we jump to the letter F and arrive at one of the most important symbols of all Kemetic spirituality, the feather of truth, the feather of Ma'at. Ma'at. This word needs to be understood because it has no direct translation. Ma'at is truth, but it is also justice, it is order, it is balance, it is cosmic harmony, it is the principle that keeps the universe functioning, that prevents chaos, Isfet, from consuming everything. Ma'at was a goddess, represented as a woman with an ostrich feather on her head, but Ma'at was also a concept, a fundamental principle, the foundation of everything, and this feather, this single plume, was used in the most important judgment any soul would face, the weighing of the heart. Imagine, you die, your soul, your ba, leaves the body and begins the journey through the Duat. You pass demons, guardians, tests, until finally you arrive at the Hall of Two Truths. There, Dusur, Osiris, waits on his throne. Inpu, Anubis, the jackal-headed god, the guardian of necropolises, is present, and Thoth, the ibis god of wisdom, holds his papyrus and pen, ready to record the result. Anpu, Anubis, leads you to a scale. A golden scale, perfectly balanced. In one of the plates, he places your heart, not your physical heart, but your spiritual heart. The Ib, the place where all your actions, thoughts, intentions reside, all the truth of who you were. And in the other plate, the feather of Ma'at, a single feather, light, delicate. And then, the weighing. If your heart were heavier than the feather, if it were loaded with lies, betrayals, cruelty, injustice, Amit was waiting, the devourer, part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus. The three most feared animals of Kemet, united in a nightmare creature. And she would eat your heart, and you would cease to exist. There would be no eternal torment, just annihilation, second death, absolute end. But if your heart were light as the feather, if you had lived in Ma'at, with truth, justice, balance, Vzur, Osiris would declare, you are true of voice, and you would be admitted to the fields of Aru, the Kemetic paradise, where you would live eternally, cultivating perfect fields, sailing in boats under eternally blue skies, in peace forever. That is why the feather of Ma'at was not just a symbol. It was a measure, the standard by which all life was judged. And the Kemetians took this seriously, very seriously. They did not believe in last-minute repentance. There was no confession that would clean your sins. Your entire life would be weighed, every action, every word, every thought, and you would face the absolute truth of who you were. That is why living in Ma'at was not optional. It was essential. Pharaohs swore to maintain Ma'at in the kingdom. Judges judged in the name of Ma'at. Common people strive to live in Ma'at. Because in the end, at the moment of death, when you stood before that scale, there would be no lies. There would be no excuses. There would be only your heart. And a feather, Jed, and the feather of Ma'at, together. These two symbols show something profound about Kemet. The Jed represents structure, physical and spiritual stability, the promise of resurrection after the fall. The feather represents content, the quality of life lived, the ethical weight of each choice. One without the other would be incomplete. You can have all the stability in the world, but if you do not have truth, if you do not live in Ma'at, what good is it? And you can have all the truth, all the justice, but without the firmness of the Jed, without the ability to stand against chaos, how will you sustain all of this? Kemet understood that life is a balance between being strong and being just, between standing firm and remaining true, and these symbols carved in millennial temples still teach us these lessons today. Now we enter even deeper territory, the symbols that explain the very nature of existence, the anatomy of the soul, and the mysteries of transformation. We begin with Ka-A concept that does not exist in modern Western culture, at least not with this name, but which the Kemetians understood perfectly. Ka is your vital force, your spiritual energy, what animates you, what makes you be you. But Ka is not the same thing as soul. The Kemetians believed each person had several spiritual parts. The Ba, your immortal soul, represented as a bird with human head. The Ib, your spiritual heart, where emotions and memories resided. The Ren, your name, your identity. The Ak, your glorified spirit after death. And the Ka, your life force. The symbol of Ka is two raised arms, turned upward as if they were receiving something or emanating something, and in fact it was exactly that. Ka was received at birth, given by the Netjeru, gods. It was your portion of divine energy, and you carried this Ka throughout life. It needed to be nurtured. That is why Kemetians made offerings at tombs, food, drink, incense, not for the dead body, but for the Ka, which continued existing, which continued needing sustenance. There was even a special class of priests, the Ka priests, whose sole function was to keep the Ka of the dead fed through daily rituals, offerings, recitation of dishes and drinks, because if the Ka were not nourished, it would weaken, and the person in the afterlife would suffer, would lose strength, could even cease to exist. But Ka was not just a funerary concern. In life, having a strong Ka meant having vitality, energy, presence, charisma. We could say today, pharaohs had extremely powerful Ka because they were children of the Necheru, gods. And their Ka was a force that emanated, that protected the entire kingdom. When a pharaoh died, they did not say the king died, they said the king went to his Ka, because death was not the end of Ka. It was a transformation, a reunion with the source. Now, let us go to Khepri, the sacred scarab, one of the most fascinating symbols of all Kemet, because it comes from observation of nature and from the genius of transforming this observation into theology. The Kemetians noticed something interesting about scarabs. These black and shiny beetles rolled balls of dung, pushed these balls through the desert, and then, from these balls, new scarabs emerged to them. It seemed that the scarab created life from nothing, from dead matter, from decomposition. New life emerged, pure transformation, and more. The ball the scarab rolled resembled the sun, and the scarab rolled it from east to west, exactly as the sun travels across the sky. So the Kemetians made the connection. The scarab was the sun, or rather, the scarab represented Khepri, the aspect of Ra, that brings dawn. Kepa was represented as a man with scarab head, or simply as a scarab and his name. Kepa means to come into being, to transform, to exist, from the verb kepa, which means to transform, because the scarab symbolized fundamental transformation, metamorphosis, rebirth, every morning. The sun does not just return, it is reborn, it transforms from Ra, the noon sun, to Atum, the setting sun, and then through the Duat, the underworld, where it is renewed, transformed, to emerge as Khepri, the rising sun, young again, strong again, transformed. And this was the promise of the scarab for every Kemetic. You too can transform, you too can be reborn. Death is not the end. It is metamorphosis, like the lava that becomes beetle, like the night that becomes day, like the sun that dies and is reborn. That is why the scarab amulet was the most popular in Kemet, even more than the Ankh. Thousands, millions were produced in stone, faience, gold, silver, small scarabs that people wore around the neck, on rings, and especially on the heart, literally. During the mummification process, the heart was usually left in the body because it would be necessary at judgment, but over the heart, or in the place where it was, a large stone scarab was placed, called heart scarab, and on it was inscribed a spell from the Book of the Dead, spell 30b, which basically said, "O my heart, do not testify against me. Do not rise as witness against me in judgment. Do not oppose me in the presence of the guardians of the scale." It was magical protection to ensure that, in the crucial moment, your own heart would not betray you. Fascinating. And now, the flower, the lotus. Another symbol born from observation of the Nile's nature. The lotus flower has unique behavior. It sinks into the water during the night and emerges again at dawn, opening its petals to the sun every day. The same cycle, death and rebirth, disappearance and return, and more. The lotus grows in mud, in the dark silt at the bottom of rivers, but emerges pure, clean, perfumed, beautiful, transforming dirt into beauty. For the Kemetians, this was deeply symbolic. The lotus represented creation. In some myths, the sun itself emerged from a lotus flower at the beginning of time, when there was only water. None. The primordial ocean. A lotus flower arose, and from within it, Ra was born, the sun, light, creation. Everything began with a lotus. That is why the flower was associated with the sun, with renewal, with purity, with divine creation. There were two main types of lotus in Kemet: the blue lotus, Nymphea caerulea, and the white lotus, Nymphea lotus, both sacred, both used in religious ceremonies. The blue lotus had mild psychoactive properties and was used in rituals, macerated in wine, to induce altered states of consciousness, visions, connection with the divine. The lotus appears throughout Kemetic art. Temple columns were carved like lotus stems, with capitals in the form of open or closed flowers. Pharaohs were portrayed smelling lotus flowers because the perfume was considered the smell of creation itself, the smell of the divine. And in funerary scenes, the deceased is often shown emerging from a lotus flower, symbolizing their rebirth in the afterlife, their transformation, their purification. Ka, keeper, Kipri, lotus. These three symbols form a triad of transformation. Ka is the energy that animates you. Kepa is the process of constant transformation, and the lotus is the promise that from this transformation emerges beauty, purity, renewal. Together, they teach that life is not static. You are not the same person today that you were yesterday. You are in constant Kepa, constant transformation. Your Ka flows, changes, adapts, and like the lotus, no matter how deep the mud, how dark the water, you can emerge, pure, renewed, reborn. This was Kemet's promise, not just life after death, but transformation after transformation. Eternal cycles of renewal, like the sun, like the scarab, like the lotus, and this promise continues alive. Today, when someone tattoos a scarab, they are declaring, "I believe in transformation." When someone wears a lotus necklace, they are saying, "I can emerge from darkness." These symbols did not die with Kemet. They continue alive because the truths they carry are eternal. We now arrive at the philosophical heart of Kemet, the symbols that define not only religion, but the very ethical and cosmic structure of the entire civilization. And we begin with Ma'at, Ma'at. We have mentioned Ma'at before, when we spoke of the feather of truth. But now we need to dive deeper, because Ma'at is not just a symbol, it is the fundamental principle upon which everything in Kemet rested. Ma'at was order, but not imposed order, natural order, cosmic harmony, the balance that keeps the universe functioning. Think of it this way: in the beginning, there was none, the primordial ocean of chaos, infinite waters, darkness, pure potentiality, but without form, without order. Then Atum, the creator, emerged, and through an act of will, created Ma'at, the order that separated light from darkness, heaven from earth, day from night. And this order needed to be maintained because chaos, Isfet, was always trying to return, always pressing at the edges of creation, wanting to undo everything. And who maintained Ma'at? Everyone, but especially the pharaoh. The pharaoh was not just a political king, he was the guardian of Ma'at every morning. In private ceremonies at the temple, the pharaoh offered a small statuette of Ma'at to the Netjeru gods, symbolizing that he maintained order in the kingdom, that he governed with justice, truth, balance. If the pharaoh failed at this, if he ruled with tyranny, lies, injustice, Ma'at would weaken and chaos would begin to leak. Harvests would fail. The Nile would not flood. Enemies would invade, diseases would arise because everything was connected. Human behavior and the functioning of the cosmos were not separate. This is absolutely revolutionary. Think about it. 5,000 years ago, Kemet already understood that our actions have cosmic consequences, that we cannot separate ethics from physics, that the way we treat each other affects the entire world. Ma'at was not just for the elite. Every Kemetic was responsible for living in Ma'at, telling the truth, acting with justice, not stealing, not killing unnecessarily, not oppressing the weak, helping the needy. These were not suggestions, they were cosmic imperatives. And when you died, before Anpu, Anubis's scale, you would recite the negative confession, 42 declarations. I have not killed. I have not stolen. I have not made anyone cry. I have not polluted the water. I have not made slave labor for myself. Each declaration was an aspect of Ma'at, and your heart would be weighed against the feather to see if you lived in truth. Now let us go to the eyes, because in Kemet, eyes were not just organs of vision, they were symbols of power, protection, knowledge, and there were two especially important eyes, the eye of Heru, Horus, and the eye of Re, Ra, similar but profoundly different. Let us begin with the eye of Heru, also called Ujat, Wedjat, which means the one that is whole or the one that is healed. The story behind this symbol is dramatic. Heru, the son of Wesir, Osiris, and Aset, Isis, was born to avenge his father, murdered by Setek, Seth. When Heru grew up, he challenged Setek and they fought, an epic battle that lasted days. During this battle, Setek tore out Heru's left eye and shattered it into 6 pieces, scattering them across Kemet. Heru was mutilated, incomplete, but Jehuti, Thoth, the nature of wisdom and magic, gathered the pieces and healed the eye, restored it, made it whole again, and Heru then offered his healed eye to his father Wesir to bring him back to life. That is why the eye of Heru represents healing, protection, wholeness, restoration. The symbol itself is fascinating. It looks like a stylized human eye with eyebrow, iris, and below, a mark that looks like a spiral or tear. This mark is actually a falcon marking because Heru was the falcon Netjer. And falcons have these natural markings under their eyes. But here is something incredible. The eye of Heru was used as a mathematical system. Each part of the eye represented a fraction, the eyebrow, 1/2, 1 to 2, the pupil, 1/4, 1 to 4, the white of the eye on the left, 1/8, 1/8, the white on the right, 1/16, 1/16, the decorative spiral, 1/32, 1/32, and the tear mark, 1/64, 1/64. Add all these fractions and you get 63/64, not 64/64, not the complete whole. It is missing 1/64. Why? Because according to myth, Jehuti used magic to heal the eye, and magic, the divine element, is this missing fraction. What cannot be measured? What cannot be quantified? True perfection only comes from the divine. Brilliant. The Kemetians used these fractions to measure grains, medicines, anything that needed to be divided. The eye of Heru was the system, but it was also protection, painted on boats, for protection on journeys, used as an amulet, for personal protection, placed in tombs, for protection in death, because it was the eye that was destroyed and restored, that knew loss and healing, that saw darkness and returned to light. Now, the eye of Re, Ra, completely different. If the eye of Heru is protection and healing, the eye of Re is power and destruction. Re, the supreme sun, Netjer, had an eye that was a weapon, an extension of his power. In some myths, the eye of Re is personified as a Netjeret, goddess, usually Sekhmet, the lioness, or Het Hert, Hathor, in her fierce aspect, or Wadjet, Wadjet, the serpent, the myth says, humans stopped respecting Re. They became arrogant, rebellious, so Re sent his eye in the form of Sekhmet, and she massacred humanity, drank their blood, destroyed cities, killed without mercy. Re eventually needed to stop her because she was destroying all of creation. So he poured beer mixed with red ochre. That looked like blood. Sekhmet drank, thinking it was human blood, got drunk and fell asleep, saving the rest of humanity. But the lesson was given. The Eye of Re was absolute power, divine destruction, implacable justice, while the Eye of Heru protects. The Eye of Re punishes, while the Eye of Heru heals. The Eye of Re destroys, but both are necessary. You need protection. Yes, but you also need justice. You need healing. Yes, but you also need strength to defend. Together. These two eyes represent the duality of divine power, mercy and judgment, healing and the sword. And Ma'at? Ma'at is what balances these two eyes. It is the principle that decides when to heal and when to destroy, when to protect and when to punish. Because the answer is not always gentleness. Sometimes, to maintain balance, strength is necessary. Kemet understood this profoundly. It was not a naive culture. It did not believe everything was resolved with love and light. It believed in balance, in proportional response, in justice, true justice, which is sometimes gentle and sometimes fierce. Ma'at, Mat, Eye of Heru, Horus, Eye of Re, Ra. Together, they form the triad of cosmic balance, order, protection, and power, all three necessary, all three eternal. And when you see these symbols together in a temple, you are seeing the complete declaration. Here we maintain Mat. Here you are protected by the Eye of Heru. And here you are under the watchful gaze of the Eye of Re. Enter in peace or face justice. The choice is yours. Now we enter the territory of sacred circles, the symbols of eternal protection, and we begin with the Shen, one of the oldest symbols of Kemet that appears since the pre-dynastic period. Before even the pharaohs, the Shen is a circle of rope with a straight line at the base, representing a loop, a closed loop, without beginning, without end, eternity. The word Shen means to encircle or to encompass, and that was exactly its purpose. To protect through encircling, to wrap something in eternity. You will see the Shen in the talons of divine birds, especially Heru, Horus in his falcon form, and Nekhbet, the white vulture of Upper Kemet. Why? Because these birds were the protectors of the pharaoh, and they held the Shen, eternity, over his head, literally guaranteeing that his reign would be eternal, that his protection would be infinite. The Shen also appears intertwined with plants, especially the papyrus of Lower Kemet and the lotus of Upper Kemet, representing the eternal union of the two lands. Kemet unified under a single king, protected forever. But the Shen also had more personal uses. Common people used Shen amulets, especially pregnant women, for protection of mother and baby, because the endless circle represented the continuity of life, the eternal cycle of birth and rebirth. And if you enlarged the Shen, stretched its circle, you would get the Shenu, Cartouche, which we already discussed, the same concept of eternal protection, but expanded to fit an entire royal name. Everything is connected. Each symbol in Kemet converses with other symbols, forming a network, a complete language, a system of interwoven meanings. Now, let us go to a symbol often confused with the Ankh, but which has completely different meaning, the Tayet, knot of Isis, also called the knot of Aset, Isis, or Tayet knot, or knot of life. Visually, it looks like an Ankh, but with the arms folded downward, as if it were an inverted ankh or a fabric knot, and in fact, it represented a knot, specifically, a knot in the fabric that wrapped the body during mummification. But it also had much deeper meanings. The Tayet was the symbol of Aset, Isis, the great mother Netjeret, the supreme magician, the protector, and it was specifically associated with blood, the menstrual blood of Aset, feminine power, fertility, magical protection. This may sound strange to modern minds, but in Kemet, menstrual blood was not taboo, it was power. It was the blood that nourishes life in the womb. It was the sign that a woman could create life. And Aset, the mother of Heru, Horus, she who resurrected Wesir, Osiris, she who protected her son against all dangers, was the personification of this feminine power. The Tayet was often made of red jasper or carnelian, red stones, symbolizing blood, and it was placed on mummies, especially in the neck or chest area, along with the Jed pillar. This combination was powerful, Djed, the masculine symbol of Wesir, stability, spine, Tayet, the feminine symbol of Aset, protection, vital blood. Together, they represented complete union, masculine and feminine, strength and nourishment, structure and magic. The Book of Coming Forth by Day, Book of the Dead, has a specific spell for the Tayet, spell 156. It says, "You have the blood of Aset. You have the power of Aset. You have the magic of Aset." To protect this great god, referring to the divinized deceased, and to ward off whoever would do something against him. It was a powerful protection invocation, calling upon the power of Aset herself, to wrap the deceased in her protective mantle, as she wrapped Heru when he was a child, protecting him from Setek, Seth, from serpents, from scorpions, from all dangers. Women especially wore Tayet amulets for protection during pregnancy, during childbirth, to ensure fertility, for general protection, and also as a symbol of identification with Aset, the divine mother, the protector, the magician. What is fascinating about the Tayet is that it shows that Kemet honored feminine power, not in abstract form, but in very concrete form. The power to give life, the power to protect, the power of magic. This was not seen as inferior to masculine power. It was complementary, essential. Aset is not a secondary Netjeret in Kemet. She is central, absolutely central, in some periods, especially in the Greco-Roman era. The cult of Aset became the most popular of all, spreading throughout the Mediterranean. Rome had temples of Aset, Greece had temples of Aset, even in Britain. In Germany, temples of Aset were found. Why? Because she represented something universal, the protective mother, she who suffers, but does not give up, she who searches for the pieces of her beloved, she who resurrects the dead, she who protects her child against all evils. This resonates across cultures, across time, and the Tayet, her symbol, carries all this power, Shen, and Tayet, knot of Isis, together, circle of eternity and knot of protection, show that for Kemet, protection was not just physical, it was cosmic, it was wrapping something, someone, in eternity, in divine power, in magic. The Shen wraps you in infinity, the Tayet wraps you in the power of Aset, Isis, and together you are complete. Protected in all directions, in all dimensions, in life, in death, and in the beyond, forever. These symbols were not decoration, they were spiritual technology, practical tools to navigate existence, and people believed in them deeply, not with blind faith, but with the confidence of those who saw these symbols work, generation after generation, for thousands of years. If a symbol survives 5,000 years, it is doing something right. It is touching something true, something eternal. And both the Shen and the Tayet are still here, still being used, still protecting, still wrapping people in their sacred circles. We now arrive at the symbols that represent the divine gaze, the gaze that protects and the gaze that destroys. We begin with one of the most immediately recognizable symbols of Kemetic royalty, the uraeus. Uraeus, the sacred serpent that adorned the crown of every pharaoh, every queen, every Netja, god, and Netjeret goddess. Raised with expanded hood, ready to attack, the uraeus was power, pure, concentrated, lethal, but also protection. The specific serpent represented in the uraeus was the Egyptian cobra, Naya Hajj, one of the most venomous serpents of the Nile, capable of spitting venom meters away, blinding and killing. The Kemetians observed this serpent, saw how it rose when threatened, how it expanded its hood, how it spat liquid fire venom into the eyes of enemies. And they thought, this is royal power. This is how a pharaoh should be, calm when not threatened, but deadly when challenged. The uraeus was more than a symbol. It was a divinity, Wajet Uto Wajet, the cobra Netjeret of Lower Kemet, protector of the pharaoh, guardian of the red crown, the Deshret, and she did not protect passively, she attacked. The texts say that the uraeus spat fire, that it burned the enemies of the pharaoh, that its eyes cast flames, that no enemy could approach because the serpent, the eye of Ra, Re, in cobra form, would destroy them. The pharaoh wore the uraeus on his forehead, exactly where some say the third eye is located, the eye of spiritual perception, of divine knowledge. This is no coincidence. The uraeus was the pharaoh's extra eye, the one that saw beyond the veil, that perceived invisible dangers and destroyed them before they could manifest. In some representations, you see two uraei, one representing Wajet Uto Wajet of Lower Kemet, another representing Nekbet, the vulture of Upper Kemet, together the two ladies, Nebti, protectors of the two lands, unified Kemet. And on some especially elaborate crowns you see multiple uraei, sometimes 6, 7, even 12 serpents, each representing an aspect of divine power, an army of fire serpents protecting the king. But the uraeus was not just for pharaohs. Netjeru wore uraeus too. Ra, Re, had the uraeus because it was his eye, his weapon. Ethert Hathor had the uraeus. Sekhmet had the uraeus. Any divinity with power of protection and destruction carried the sacred serpent. And here is something interesting. Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh, according to legend, died from the bite of an asp, a serpent. Some historians believe this was intentional, that she chose to die through the serpent, to unite with the uraeus, to become herself the divine serpent, transforming her death into apotheosis, into divinization, not a defeat, but a transformation, typical of Kemet, even in death, transforming the end into transcendence. Now let us revisit the Ujat, Eye of Horus, the Eye of Heru, Horus. We have spoken of it before, but here we go deeper. Because the Ujat is not just a symbol, it is an amulet, the most produced amulet in all of Kemet's history. Millions, literally millions of Ujats were made in faience. Stone, gold, silver, bronze, small, medium, large, and to wear, to carry, to bury. Why? Because the Ujat promised something everyone wanted: total protection, healing, wholeness, restoration. Remember the story. Heru, Horus, lost his eye in battle against Setek, Seth. It was shattered into 6 pieces. Jehuti, Thoth, healed it, restored it, and Heru then used this healed eye to give life back to Weser, Osiris, or at least to reanimate him long enough. So the Ujat represented healing of what was broken, restoration of what was lost, power to give life, and protection against being broken again. Kemetians painted Ujats on boats, on both sides of the bow, so the boat could see the way and be protected on its journeys. These painted eyes are called oculi, and you still see them on Mediterranean boats today. In Greece, in Malta, in Turkey, the tradition continued 5,000 years, and boats still have eyes, still are protected by the Ujat. The Ujat was also used in architecture, especially over doors, protecting the entrance, seeing who enters and who exits, warding off negative energies. And on mummies, Ujats were painted on the left side of the sarcophagus at the eye level of the deceased, so they could see outside the coffin, so they could observe the rituals, so they could somehow still participate in the world. There is something deeply moving about this. The idea that the deceased is not simply inert, but is watching, seeing their loved ones, seeing the priests perform the rituals, still present, still seeing through the ujat, the mathematical eye, remember, each part representing a fraction, but adding up to only 63, 64, the missing part being divine magic. This also had practical meaning. Kemetic physicians used the ujat as prescription, each part of the eye indicating a measure of medicine. Half cup of this, a quarter of that, an eighth of another ingredient. Medicine was intertwined with magic. Physical healing and spiritual healing were not separate, and the ujat was the tool for both. Now Uraeus and Ujat, Eye of Horus, together, serpent and eye, they seem different but they are connected. Both are forms of divine gaze. The Uraeus is the eye of Ra, Re, active, aggressive destroyer. The Ujat is the eye of Heru, Horus, passive, protective healer. But both see, both protect, just in different ways. One through attack, another through wholeness. And the pharaoh, wearing both, had complete protection. The Uraeus on his forehead, looking forward, ready to spit fire, and Ujat amulets on his clothes, in his jewelry, protecting with wholeness. Attack and defense, fire and healing, destruction and restoration, complete balance. And we today, when we see someone wearing an Eye of Heru, Horus necklace, we might think, just fashion, just aesthetics. But there is something deeper happening, even if unconsciously. The person is seeking protection, wholeness, healing. The symbol still works, not because it has intrinsic magical power, but because it carries 5,000 years of human intention, 5,000 years of people looking at this symbol and saying, protect me, heal me, keep me whole. This energy, this collective intention accumulates, becomes real, and the Ujat continues protecting because we continue believing in it. Similarly, the Uraeus still represents power. You see serpents in company logos, in military emblems, in medical symbols. The serpent of healing. The power of the serpent, of the penetrating gaze, of fierce protection, still resonates, still is understood, even by people who never studied Kemet. The symbol speaks directly to the subconscious, to the ancient part of us that still remembers that the serpent is power, that the eye is protection, that these symbols, carved millennia ago in desert stones, still speak to us, still protect us, still heal us if we allow it. Now we enter the territory of manifest power, the symbols that represent not just authority, but divine authority, the right to rule granted by the Necheru themselves. And we begin with one of the most iconic objects of Kemet, the Waz scepter, which you see in the hand of practically every Necher, god, every pharaoh, every symbol of authority. It is a long staff with a forked base and a top in the form of an animal head, usually interpreted as the Setek, Seth animal, or sometimes a wild dog or jackal, though the exact animal is debated to this day. But what is not debated is the meaning. Power, domination, control. Waz is literally the Kemetic word for power and dominion, and the scepter was the physical manifestation of this concept. To hold the Waz was to declare, I have power, I rule, I dominate, and not common human power but divine power. Because only Necheru and pharaohs held the complete Waz, common people never. For it would be blasphemy, it would be claiming divinity. The Waz appears in hieroglyphs. Literally, the word power is written with the image of the scepter. And when you see multiple symbols together, for example, an Ankh, a Jed, and a Waz, you are reading a sentence, life, stability, and power, a triad that appears repeatedly in Kemet, because these were the three essential things for a successful reign, for a well-lived life, for the cosmos to function properly. Life through the Ankh, stability through the Jed, power through the Waz. Together they formed the complete formula. And you saw this combination on thrones, on temple walls, on ceremonial scepters. on votive offerings, a declaration, an affirmation, a blessing. May you have life, stability, and power. The format of the vase is interesting. The forked base, like 2 feet, allowed the scepter to stand alone, self-sustained, symbol that true power does not need external support. It sustains itself, and the top, the animal head, usually identified with Setek, Seth, is fascinating, because Setek is the nature of chaos, disorder, violence, but also of brute force. The desert, storms. Why would the symbol of power have Setek's head? Because the Kemetians understood that power without control is destruction, but also that control without power is weakness. You need Setek's strength, the ability to be violent when necessary, to dominate, to subjugate, but this force must be in the right hands, in the pharaoh's hands, who governs with Ma'at. So the vase is Setek, domesticated, Setek channeled, Setek in service of order, not eliminated because you cannot eliminate chaos completely, but controlled, directed, used. There is a special type of vase called the vase scepter of papyrus, where the top is not an animal head but a papyrus flower, used especially in contexts related to Lower Kemet and carrying connotations of power, but also fertility, renewal, growth, power that nourishes, not just dominates. Nigerites such as Aset, Isis, Hethert, Hathor, and Sekhmet also held was scepters, and when a goddess held the was, the meaning shifted subtly. It was still power, but with different dimensions. Power to create, not just destroy. Power to nurture, not just subjugate. Power to transform, not just dominate. The feminine was the power of nature, of life that insists on sprouting, of the tide that cannot be stopped, of the storm that cleanses and renews. Now let us go to Wadjet, Uto, whom we already mentioned when we spoke of the Uraeus, but who deserves special attention because she is more than just the serpent on the pharaoh's crown. She is one of the oldest Netjeret of Kemet, venerated since the pre-dynastic period, before unification, before the pharaohs, before the pyramids. Wadjet Uto was the protective goddess of Lower Kemet. Her sacred city was Dep Buto in the Nile Delta, and she was represented as a cobra, but also sometimes as a woman with cobra head, or a woman wearing the red crown of Lower Kemet with a cobra emerging from it. Her name means the green one, or she of the papyrus, referring to the fertile green plantations of the delta, the abundance of Lower Kemet. But do not be deceived by the association with fertility. Wadjet Uto was fierce, deadly, implacable protector. She was called Lady of Heaven, ruler of all Netjeru, the Eye of Ra, Re, and her main role was to protect the pharaoh, not in gentle form, but by destroying his enemies, burning them with fire, blinding them with venom. The texts say that Wadjet Uto spat flames, that her forked tongue was fire, that her eyes cast rays, and that no enemy of the pharaoh could survive her gaze. There is a fascinating story about Wadjet Uto. During the infancy of Heru, Horus, when Aset, Isis, hid him in the papyrus marshes of the delta, fleeing from Setek, Seth, it was Wadjet Uto who protected the baby, coiling around him, keeping him warm, and attacking any creature that approached. Scorpions, serpents, crocodiles, all were driven away or killed by Wadjet Uto. That is why Wadjet Uto and Aset, Isis, were often associated, both protective mothers, both magicians, both fierce when their children were threatened. When Kemet was unified around 3100 BCE by Narmer, Menes, Wadjet Uto of Lower Kemet was united with Nekhbet, Eileithia, the vulture Netjeret of Upper Kemet. Together they were the two ladies, Nebti, and every pharaoh had a Nebti name, one of the 5 great names he received. And this name was preceded by the symbols of Wadjet Uto and Nekhbet, Eileithia, the cobra and the vulture, declaring that the pharaoh was under the protection of both, that he ruled the two lands unified but maintaining their identities. In art and hieroglyphs, Wadjet Uto is often shown intertwined with papyrus plants, her cobra head emerging from the reeds, and this is not just decorative but symbolic. For Wadjet Uto, emerges from what is hidden, from the land itself, invisible until it is too late. Just like a real cobra in the marshes that strikes from nowhere, unseen until the fatal moment. And this was the protection she offered the pharaoh, invisible protection. Always present, but not seen until it was necessary, and then lethal, absolutely lethal. Wadjet, Uto, also had an oracular aspect. Her temple in Buto was a center of prophecy. Priestesses interpreted dreams, entered trances, and spoke the words of the goddess, predicting the future, warning of dangers, guiding royal decisions. This makes sense, because the serpent in many cultures is associated with wisdom, with hidden knowledge, with the secrets of the earth. And Wadjet Uto, as divine serpent, had access to knowledge that humans did not have. She saw through the veil between present and future, between the manifest and the hidden. Wasn't Wadjet Uto together, scepter and serpent, represent complementary aspects of divine power. The was is formalized power, structured. The scepter you hold, the authority you exercise, the dominion you claim. Wadjet Uto is wild power, instinctive, protection that needs no ritual, force that acts without command, the danger that emanates naturally from those with real power. Together, they say, true power is not just granted authority, not just a scepter you hold, it is also the inner force, the ability to protect, to attack, to defend, that emanates from you naturally, like the uraeus on your forehead, like the serpent that surrounds you. The pharaoh was not powerful just because he had a title. He was powerful because the Netjeru protected him, because Wadjet Uto wrapped him in her deadly embrace, because the was in his hands, given by the gods, not taken by force. And this is a crucial distinction in Kemet. Legitimate power comes from the Netjeru. Illegitimate power is usurpation, and usurpers do not have Wadjet Uto's protection. They do not have the true was. They may have military force, yes, but they do not have divine power. And without divine power, the kingdom crumbles. Ma'at unravels, chaos returns. That is why the was and Wadjet Uto were not just symbols of power. They were guarantees of legitimacy, proof that the pharaoh had the divine right to rule. And when you see these symbols together in a relief, you are seeing a political declaration, theological and cosmic. This ruler has legitimate power. This ruler is protected by the gods. This ruler maintains Ma'at and therefore obey. We arrive at the end of the alphabet, but not at the end of the journey. Because in Kemet ends and beginnings are the same thing. Cycles, eternal returns, the sun that dies and is reborn, the soul that crosses the Duat and returns, life that flows, stops and flows again. The letter Z in our Western alphabet represents the end. But here we use it to talk about something Kemet understood profoundly, the concept of the closed cycle, of circular eternity, of the zero that contains infinity. Think of the Shen, the rope circle without beginning or end. Think of the uraeus, the serpent that bites its own tail, the Ouroboros, symbol of self-sustenance, of self-renewal, of everything that is, always was and always will be, only changing form, transforming, but never truly being born and never truly dying. This is the concept of zero that contains everything, the fertile void, Nun, the primordial ocean, which was nothing yet everything in potential. For Kemet did not see nothingness as absence, but as infinite possibility, as the space between things that allows things to exist, like the silence between notes that makes music make sense. Looking back at the entire path we have traveled from A to Z, from Ankh to this moment of synthesis, we visited 17 main symbols. Ankh, the key of eternal life and union of opposites. Amenta, the horizon of the underworld and the passage between worlds. Shenu, Cartouche, protection of the name, identity and essence. Jed, stability and resurrection, the column that stands firm. The feather of Ma'at, truth and justice, the weight of the soul. Ka, vital force and spiritual energy, what animates you. Huber, Kepri, transformation and constant rebirth. The lotus, purity emerging from mud, creation and solar renewal. Megit, Ma'it, cosmic order, balance, universal harmony. The eye of Heru, Horus, protection, healing, restored wholeness. The eye of Ra, Re, power, divine destruction and fire. Shen, the circle of eternity and endless protection. Tiet, the knot of Aset, Isis, feminine power, sacred blood and magical protection. Uraeus, the royal serpent of Wajet Uto, lethal power and fierce protection. Ujat, the complete eye of Heru, Horus, mathematical vision, healing and restoration, was the scepter of power and divine dominion. And Wajet Uto, serpent goddess, protector of Lower Kemet and guardian of the pharaoh. 17 main symbols, but actually hundreds, because each unfolds, connects with others, forms networks of meaning, creates a system, a complete language. And what does this language tell us? First, that everything is connected, life and death. Light and darkness, masculine and feminine, are not warring opposites, but complements in dance. The Ankh unites opposites. The Jed and Tiet work together. The eyes of Heru, Horus, and Ra, Re balance each other. And there is no absolute good versus absolute evil, but rather Ma'at, Mat, balance and harmony. Second, the transformation is constant. You are not static. You are Keper, Kepri, always becoming, like the scarab rolling its ball, like the lotus that sinks and emerges, like the sun that dies and is reborn. Death is not the end, but transformation, and life is not fixed, but constant movement. Third, that protection is essential, because chaos is Fet, always presses at the edges. This is why you need the Uraeus, the Ujat, the Shen, the Tiet, for protection in all forms, physical, spiritual, magical. And this protection is not paranoia, but wisdom, awareness of danger and preparation. Fourth, that power must be legitimate, for the Waz is not just force, but divine authority. And Wajet, Uto, does not protect usurpers. Ma'at, Ma'at, does not sustain tyrants. True power comes from being aligned with cosmic order, from ruling or living with truth, justice and balance. Fifth, that the name, the Ren, identity itself, is sacred. The cartouche protects the name because erasing a name is killing a person a second time, and identity must be honored. Sixth, that life must be lived in Ma'at, Ma'at, in truth, order, justice and balance. Because in the end, before Anpu's Anubis scale, your heart will be weighed against the feather, and only truth will pass. Only those who lived with integrity will know true eternal life. And seventh, perhaps most important, that all of this is accessible, not just for pharaohs or priests, but for everyone. That is why amulets were produced by the millions, why even the poorest carried an ankh, a scarab, and dujat. Kemet's spirituality was not elitist, but universal. Because everyone had K, Ba, Ren, and Ib, everyone would be judged by the same feather, and everyone could aspire to eternity if they lived in Ma'at. Now look at the world today. 5,000 years later, Kemet fell. The dynasties ended, temples abandoned, language forgotten until Champollion, but then resurrection, the symbols returned, the stories remembered. And today, people across continents, of all races and cultures, wear ankh necklaces, tattoo the eye of Heru, Horus, carry scarabs, paint lotuses. Why? Because these symbols still work. They still speak universal truths. They still touch something deep within us. The need for eternal life, for transformation, for protection, for justice, for identity. The symbols of Kemet are a bridge across time, across cultures, connecting us all to the African civilization of the Nile that gave the world one of the deepest spiritual languages, most beautiful and enduring ever created. This alphabet from A to Z is not just a list. It is a map of the human soul, of the cosmos, of how to navigate existence with grace, power, truth, and eternity. And the most incredible thing is you do not need to be Egyptian to use it. You do not need to rebuild temples or worship the Netjeru, though you may if you wish. You can simply learn the symbols, understand their meanings, and apply them in your life. Seek Mayat in chaos. Embrace Kepa, Kepri and change. Protect your Ren name with your cartouche. Nourish your car with experiences that make you feel alive. And always seek the Ankh, full life in all its forms. The symbols are tools, spiritual technology developed over millennia, tested by millions of lives, proven because they are still here, still working, still transforming. From A to Z, from Ankh to zero and infinity, this is the sacred language of Kemet, the alphabet of eternity, and now you know it. And so we reach the end of this journey, but also the beginning, because knowledge about Kemet is not something that is exhausted, but something that deepens, layer after layer, symbol after symbol, each one revealing more mysteries, more connections, more depth. Today we traveled through the sacred alphabet of Kemet, from A to Z, and we saw 17 main symbols, though we touched on dozens of others, netjeru, concepts, practices, and if you pay attention, you notice that everything is connected, each symbol conversing with the others, forming a web, a network of meanings, a complete system of understanding the universe. The Ankh gave us the key of life, but it is the car that animates this life, and it is Kepa, Kepri, that constantly transforms it. Ma'at, gave us the principle of balance, but it is the eyes of Heru, Horus, and Ra, Re, that protect and apply it. The Jed gave us stability, but it is the Tiet of Aset, Isis, that complements it with nourishment and magic. The Waz gave us power, but it is Wajet, Uto, who ensures this power is legitimate. They are not isolated symbols, but parts of a living organism, of a complete philosophy, of a total way of seeing and living life. And this way, this vision, is African. Born in the heart of Africa, on the banks of the Nile, from the mountains of Ethiopia, from the Great Lakes, from the fertile soil of the Black Land, Kemet. Kemet was, is, and always will be an African civilization, and its spirituality, wisdom, and symbols are African heritage, adopted and studied by the world, admired everywhere, but rooted deeply in the black, powerful earth of Kemet. For you, who have accompanied us this far, this journey does not end. It is just beginning, because now you have the tools, you know the language, you can walk into a temple and read its walls, you can enter a museum and understand what the amulets mean. You can look at life itself and apply these principles. Seek Ma'at in chaos, embrace Kepa Kepri in change, protect your Ren with the cartouche, nourish your Ka with experiences that give you vitality, and always, always seek full life, the Ankh in all its forms. These symbols crossed 5,000 years. They survived empires, changes of religion, centuries of oblivion, and today they are more alive than ever because they touch something eternal, fundamental human needs that never change. The need for meaning, for protection, for transformation, for justice, for life after death, for legitimate power, for preserved identity. All of this Kemet understood and encoded in symbols so that millennia later we could still learn, still grow, still transform. So when you leave this journey and return to your life, take these symbols with you, not just as historical knowledge, but as living tools, as inspiration, as reminders that you too are part of something greater, part of a flow of wisdom that crosses the ages, part of a civilization that still speaks through the stones, through the symbols, through you who now knows the language, the alphabet of eternity, and can use it to write your own story, with life, stability, and power. Ankh, Jed, Waz, to transform, protect, and transcend. Kepa, Kepri, Ujat, Ma'at, Mat. This was your journey through the sacred symbols of Kemet, from A to Z, from the beginning to the end and back to the beginning. Because in Kemet, everything is a circle, everything is eternal, and everything continues forever.